Hello and welcome to our podcast, Everyday People, Extraordinary Performance. My name is Abigail Wilson.
And I'm Natalie Brown. And today we have the pleasure of welcoming two very special guests on this podcast. We have the fabulous twin brothers, Josh and Rob Liddiard. Both have extraordinary backgrounds in youth and senior football coaching. And although similar interests in football, education, and career paths, they both have their very own unique experience within the industry across the country. So we will let them tell us a bit more about their backgrounds and their journey into the world of professional football so far. But please welcome to the podcast, Rob and Josh. Thank you so much for joining us. Josh, I think it's best if you can give us a bit of a background of yourself, especially the journey that you've had in the world of professional football and coaching.
Yeah, thanks for having me on in the first case. Yeah, a bit different, I suppose. I started just like being any young boy wanting to play football. That didn't materialise, obviously. So always had an interest in it. Went through school, loving PE, not really being great at anything else, just getting by. And then, into college and then university, studying football coaching performance at University of South Wales. So Rob, funnily enough, followed me there as well. But yeah, we moved together, but then path took us down different routes. So I started with Newport County following university and just a part-time football coaching role. Then moved to Bristol City with the boys, and then back to Newport County in a full-time capacity as a lead phase coach, looking at under 12s to 16s. And then just September changed role to work for the Football Association of Wales in a South Girls Academy manager. So looking after our most elite players in Wales, in the south of Wales. So yeah, a bit of a change, but more of a management change rather than a on-pitch change, I suppose.
But still the world of football.
Yeah, still the world of football, yeah.
Now, Rob, what about you? What's your path and journey? How has it? When did it split from Josh's?
Yeah, like you said, like similar upbringing, really. Same university degree, same university, and that was, I think, we're very much together at that point. And then coming out of university, I took the step into teaching as like a teaching assistant and learning support mechanism in a school in Weston-super-Mare, which is in the down in Somerset, England. From there, really, the pandemic hit. It got quite stressful in that space. Then I took the step back into football after having a small break in a full-time capacity. And that role kind of consisted around education as well as football. So it was working with athletes and their dual career aspects, whether that was being an elite sports person, predominantly football, say elite high-performing sports person, as well as doing their studies, specifically in women's sport as well. Before having a break, after we had about a 9-month break, and then stepped back into football midway through last year. But within that, I've been working with Fitness Hope as a business in the business consultancy space in the corporate world, which is slightly different. But yeah, I guess that's where we've taken a bit of a change there from me and Josh. From always working together as coaches to not seeing each other very much anymore, only in family gatherings because we're in completely different parts of the UK.
Oh, but still close as twin brothers, I'm guessing.
Sometimes.
The brotherly love.
I think that's really interesting that, you've kind of always had football to come back to. And as you say, you've kind of gone down slightly different paths now, which is quite interesting as well. So today we'd like to discuss a bit more about your fairly different, I believe, experiences within football organisations. As you say, you've both worked within that kind of area. Josh, obviously you're still within it. So can we maybe start with yourself, Rob, first, in terms of what kind of cultures have you experienced over the years within the different organisations in sport that you've been part of?
Yeah, I think various differences across the board, really. No place is like the other, which is a challenge to adapt to. So I went from working part-time in clubs similar to Josh with Newport County and Bristol City, where the culture was, they're very aware of what they were. Newport being high performing at what they did, producing players to a football League Two in England level. And that was where they were. And that was okay. Bristol City was slightly different. They were in the women's game were working at the highest level that they possibly could, but the resource they had was limited compared to the other teams in that competition that they were in. Again, very aware of that, but trying to narrow the gap in different ways. So they spent a lot of time around their, said already about dual career pathway, but around developing young people in their skill set of being a footballer, but also education. And that is a challenge in itself, because the reality of sport, from my experience, is not everyone's going to play at a high level. That's the reality. If you have 18 players or 18 young athletes, 17 might get through to the next age group. 2 of them might play for the first team. So what are they setting these individuals up for? Was a reality check for the players themselves, parents, and for coaches who are coming into the environment, because it was, you get attached to these people. You spend a lot of time with the individuals for them to then not succeed, so we say, when actually they're just going down a different path. So the culture of that was a challenge, because people needed to realize what it was, and the education that was put in place at the start probably wasn't there. And then moving into not my most recent club, but the previous before the role that I'm in now, the balance between winning at all costs to developing our program was a constant headache. Not only me, but for the staff, players felt it, the ownership felt that problem, and that was something that took its toll on a lot of people, because if you weren't winning, people were getting pushed out the door as a management team. But at the same time, you got to produce people locally, because there wasn't much else. We didn't have a massive financial budget that we could dive into. You had to produce your own, which is kind of the space that I existed in, with producing players for that first team. But ultimately, if I wasn't doing my job well enough, the first team manager is the person that took the blame, because they weren't winning games on a Sunday afternoon. And that the blame culture within that becomes quite big. And then within sport itself, it's always, from my experience, people try one up each other, and that's okay. Everyone wants to try get to the top. But I think that, from my personality, I think being a good person is first and foremost. And that's kind of where I sit, that I want to change the mold slightly, that actually to be at the top, you don't have to be ruthless in an aggressive way. You can be people-centric, you can be trustworthy, you can be honest. And sometimes that gets lost because of the end goal of winning a game of football or producing the next best thing, because it makes a financial difference to the football club. So yeah, it's a long-winded answer, but yeah, culture is, again, not the same in any place.
But I guess it's had a lot more spotlight, actually, in the media in general. I would say in the last few years, really, only about culture in a football club, and I think it's something that is only really recent that it's been talked about, very much also with England football team and management, and how the leadership has been obviously developing players and things. And I think it's just so much more president, and people are just so much more aware of it, what culture within an organization, or a football organization, actually means. And I think people are more, it always existed. I mean, it's always been there, but it's always kind of been on the hidden agenda, and people are realizing there are other ways of
Yeah,
what it means to have a positive
yeah,
culture.
absolutely. But from working within the last few years, the targets that I was set at the start of the season was, make this team cohesive. And what that meant was, let's do a team building exercise, go to the beach and do some games type thing. But that hasn't got any, well, probably argue that doesn't have any lasting effect. So it's understanding what culture actually is and how to develop it. And I think that's probably the biggest part I've taken from coming away from football and dipping my toe back in recently, is that learning from different organizations. I think other organizations are very good at or other industries are very good at taking from one another. Sport could do more to do that with that. So it'd be interesting to see how that develops again. But there's been a lot of media attention, like you said, because of the success of the England national team, sometimes the failure of the England national team in the men's game, and more home nations specifically qualify for the major tournaments. So recently we've had Josh's nation, Wales, qualify for the Euros. Hopefully I can wangle some tickets off Josh there for the England-Wales game. We'll see. So that's definitely helped. And that can only lead to more positive things down the line.
I'm noticing silence from Josh on the ticket, so we'll just move on so as not to start a domestic in the Liddiard family. I think it's really interesting what you're saying there, Rob, about there's this kind of pressure in terms of it's win at all costs. And I understand, obviously, there's the financial pressures that go with that for a club. But I just find it so interesting because you think of football being a team sport, and not just the team that are on the pitch, but the team that actually get those players onto the pitch. So the physios, the coaches, like everyone involved in it. And I just find that quite interesting, that it is quite a stark difference between that. As you're saying, you'd think there would be more in the camp of let's all work together on this. And as you kind of said, kind of value being a good person above being maybe so cutthroat about it. So it's interesting to hear your take on it. Josh, I guess, as we've said, you guys have, I think, quite different experiences. So could you talk us through some of your experiences? Because that might shed light on some of the questions I have.
Yeah, I've been, I know I've been really fortunate just from like, obviously Rob's experienced his situation, but I've been there with him. So I know his situations. I've been completely opposite really in terms of really positive cultural, like just good people that I've worked with or for. There's like a few people that spring to mind, but I remember at Newport County, I was like a young coach coming in, and the lead phase at that time, John Nash was brilliant to me, allowed me to make mistakes because I was a young coach, but he would like help me with how to maybe change the outcome or to help develop me, as much as there was a focus about players that we were working with. Like he really wanted to help me, and like I haven't worked with John now for 10 years, but I still speak to him weekly. We're still really good friends. So it's brilliant that we've continued that relationship. And moving on to Bristol City, I remember my first week there, I was really nervous. Bristol City's my boyhood club, the club I support, and I've had a season ticket when we were really young. And yeah, going in there wearing the kit is like a bit like, oh, nervous, don't want to do anything wrong. And there was two guys there, Luke Hussey, who was the head of schoolboy coaching, and Dean Parsons, who was my lead phase. And the first week, they invited me to everything, every meeting. They invited me out for coffees to catch up and like get to know me. And like that really made a huge impact on me in terms of maybe how I try lead now, in terms of like trying to get to know people. And obviously there's a line don't cross, but like understanding where their situations, their background. Yeah, that was probably the two biggest things, like people getting to know me rather than just judging me as a football coach. Understanding me as a person was really beneficial. And then moving into when I went to Newport, Luke Hussey was there still, and worked full time for him then. And just the ability for him to bring people into discussions and make you feel part of the project and have some accountability around that project. But also he was, as our leader as such, was making sure that whatever happened, he was accountable. So if he gave us a job and didn't go very well, he would take responsibility for that, and he would carry things on his shoulders. When he knew we were a young team at Newport County the second time, as a member of staff, we were probably between 25 to 30 in terms of football coaching. That was apart from Luke, and Luke just carried everything. When he knew we'd make mistakes, he was brilliant with that. And like I said, the opportunity to make mistakes and not to be punished, I suppose, like Rob's talked about, make mistake with results. That wasn't even a, obviously there was, can't cost too big a line, but there was a bit of support around, and you knew you could go and try things, which was a massive part for me, and like something I hope I'm giving my staff now, like that they have some accountability and some responsibility of the project we have here with our South Girls Academy. And yeah, they take some ownership of it as well. And I suppose the other bit, and that I've learned from just all these people that I've worked with and like the good people we've had, is that it's not just about me as much as it might be like my name on the door or whoever's name on the door. It's about the people you've got in the program that are going to ultimately make it the best it can be. It's not about one person's think is, this is my team. This is how I want us to do it. It's actually like, how are we going to do this together? How can we make this work? And just try and build like relationships through that. Especially when we've got young staff, they want to have some sort of responsibility. And I was in that boat 7, 8 years ago. I wanted to have responsibility, but people give me that chance, so I need to do that as well now.
So is that what, obviously with the change now from moving almost from the pitch and coaching to management role, you've clearly learned and taken a lot of things along the way already that you've mentioned that you want to put into your current role. But how did you find the transition from the coaching on the pitch into a management role? How did you find that transition?
I think it slowly happened anyway. I think when I
Mhm.
was at Bristol City, I was a coach, and then went back to Newport. I was a coach, but had some sort of management responsibilities in terms of I had like a group of staff I had to look after, and now I've got all the staff to look after. So it's been a gradual thing. This jump been challenging, just in terms of meetings and something that I'll come that we got training this evening, for example, and I plan to be out on the pitch, but that could change instantly. That could be 5 to 5 when we start at 5. At 5 to 5, I could be my whole evening could change because of whatever's happened. So that's the challenge and of trying to juggle everything. But I think again, because of the relationship I hope we've built as a good team of staff, I think that the understanding and also the people covering each other is really strong. And that's what I wanted to bring as part of what my working relationship with people was. It like we cover each other and we support each other with whatever we need. But yeah, that's been my biggest challenge, if I'm honest, is being less on the pitch. Because obviously I've still got a massive appetite to help young people. It's more strategic now than actually being on the pitch doing things. And sometimes I'm stood on the side of the pitch watching the sessions or games. And I will say something, and I'm looking down to the coaches. I hope I haven't stood on their toes. But I think they know that there's like a journey for them as coaches and me in my role. I think we're moving together, which is a really positive thing as well.
That's brilliant. I think, as you say, as long as it's done with the best intentions and your team know that I'm doing it because I really want to be part of it. It's not coming from a bad place. So,
Yeah.
no, it's interesting. So you've kind of already touched on it yourself, Josh, but a question for both of you. In your experiences, it seems like leadership has played quite a big part in terms of the experiences you guys have had. So based on that, what kind of major influences have you had along the way of good leadership, but equally if you've seen maybe bad leadership, because there's as much to be learned from that. So I'll leave the floor open to you guys to discuss that.
Rob,
I'll jump in. I think we've already alluded to the experiences I've had are different to Josh, but it's not hide away from the fact there's been some really, really good stuff that I've taken with me on my journey, and hopefully with people can see that when they work with me. I think the biggest bit as a great guy called Ewan Greeno, who was at my last club with me. In fact, he was my direct line manager for a period before moving on. But the biggest thing he taught me about being your authentic self and just bringing your personality to the role rather than trying to be something different. And that was probably a big mistake I made when he moved on, was actually I tried to replicate myself to be what the next person wanted. And that didn't work. And the nicest way it didn't work, I didn't feel myself. I lost the appetite that Josh says he's clearly got. I lost the appetite because I didn't feel like I was being myself. So being authentic with your work is a massive thing, because actually people are the answer a lot of the time. Sometimes you'll get someone that's a bit of a cultural assassin, but that's hopefully few and far between. So I think the authentic self piece, and then continuously wanting to improve as well, being the biggest thing. Ewan had worked as a full-time capacity for many more years than I have. He won't be happy with me saying that. But he always wanted to develop himself, whether that was watching newer coaches, whether that was listening to podcasts, reading books, being up to date with the latest research, because football and the world is ever evolving, so you can't just stand still. And that's definitely something I've tried to do. Even coming away from football, I've still tried to be in it at some point, whether that's just research, whether that's speaking to a network, like I've got quite an easy network with Josh, and just making myself develop and keep learning. And actually that's kind of being my authentic self anyway, because that's kind of what I like to do. That's kind of the fuel. So that's probably the biggest leadership positively anyway. The negative stuff, I think I struggle when people are abrupt, whether that's sometimes in the sport as a play, sometimes it's my way or the highway. And I think sometimes that might bring some sort of short-term success, because if there's been a negative culture and a new person's coming in, sometimes they might have to be quite abrupt because they need to change things instantly. But just from my experiences, think that has a sell by date, whereas cultural change takes time and that's a gradual process. So I think leadership being abrupt and forthcoming and sometimes quite aggressive, I don't think that works long term. I think some people can buy into that. I know that for me as a young athlete, when I was playing, I quite liked it when someone told me what I needed to do and why. But I know even if we look at on this podcast, I know for a fact that Josh would probably bite back at someone as a young athlete. So it's learning people's skills and their personalities. But I think the best way to do that is by being your authentic self and being curious.
No,
What
I
about
love
you,
that.
Josh?
I think for me, I alluded to it already, but the good leaders have allowed you to feel safe with what you do. So as a psychological safety piece around that in terms of being okay with mistakes, being okay with different thinking, okay with clashing at times, because sometimes, particularly in football, it's quite opinionated. It's as a sport, it could be about whoever, about teams, about players, about whatever. But being okay with challenge. But if you don't agree with someone, doesn't mean they're gonna not schedule you for coaching or to move you on. I suppose other people I've alluded to already, and Luke and Dean and John were really good with that in terms of make you feel like be yourself and bits around that. In terms of things that I don't think work, I think false promising I don't think that works for if I'm speaking to a player, a parent, or like a member of staff. And I've had experiences where I've been told to do something, and I've done it, and then I haven't got anything from it, and that's frustrating. That can take its toll on people, particularly coaches that are part time. I think now in my role, because I'm full time, you get asked to do something, like you do it, and that's part of your role. Where if I'm going to ask someone this, like a teacher in the day, and they're in 8 in the morning till 4, and then they come in straight from coaching, and I'm giving them a job that's no real impact. I don't think that's going to help them. Or it might be that there's a role come out, and this happened personally. The role come out, I got told to apply, didn't even get an interview, and it's like taking the time to apply. You've told me to apply for one I've applied to, didn't even get feedback at the time that I've talked about. Is that we went on like a family holiday for 2 weeks. The other staff that I knew had applied hadn't heard anything, but were seeing interviews going on in the office, and I was on holiday getting exactly the same feedback from them. And I got back to them being away, and I got called into an office, and they went, sorry, Josh, we didn't shortlist you for interview." I was like, "Yeah, I knew that because the interviews were while I was away." So that's obviously the false promises is something I can't get on board with. I think if you're going to say something, you have to action it, and that's again like something that I try to do. And be honest as well. If I can't do something and they want me to do something, I'll say that just can't happen, or give them the rationale of why that can't happen. Well, oh yeah, we'll look at it. People, they're looking at it. It will happen eventually, but actually, throw away.
About kind of setting clear expectations, isn't it? Like you were kind of saying at the beginning, Rob, as well. It's that clear expectations and setting people up for success. So I think it's a good point.
And I also think it's quite often these are not just for football organizations unique to them. It's something that happens in every organization, regardless of what type of organization. It's managing these kind of cultural aspects. I think is really important, and I think you can learn quite a lot from the sporting settings into your day or ordinary organizations as well, and vice versa. And it's important to making sure that you have all these different angles and aspects and views. So it's really interesting to hear the sporting element of it and just the sporting cultures and how they can be negative, how positive experiences, and how they have influences on everyone within an organization. But as I said before, I think it's so important now because of the media as well, because it has shined a light on it, and giving people that platform now as well to speak up about it. So it's good to hear that obviously there are positive experiences, but there are things to evolve, there are things to improve. So it's been fascinating, especially that obviously both of you are in that. You brothers, you twin brothers on top of it, and you both have had this journey really within football and still have. So it's fascinating. Do you guys think you ever will work together again in the football world? In what capacity could that be?
I'd like to, yeah. I think just like myself and Rob, as much as we're similar in terms of we're both coaches, we have very different strengths and areas of improvement. And I think any time personally I've worked with Rob, I've probably been a better coach because of that. That'd probably be, yeah, I'd like to. When that happens is another thing. And if it allows roles allow that to happen is another thing. But yeah, I think his strengths
Nice.
help me, and I like to think I would do the same.
I don't think I could work with Josh's leadership style, to be honest. No.
Hey, you're looking for
Right,
tickets.
there it goes.
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I am. Now, no, I think that would probably be when you're in organisations, about having people you trust. And obviously, there's a slight bias because we're brothers, but that probably lends itself. Actually, we trust each other more than, and we have a good balance as well. That when we have worked with each other in the past, it's not been. Well, at the time, we're still living at home in the family house, but we knew how to switch off. Granted, there's a lot of conversation around football, but that changed from working at Newport County at the same time and Bristol City at the same time to then actually we're talking about Bristol City because they're on the telly, not because it's our job. So it was finding, we could find the balance quite easily, which sometimes I think people struggle with. But yeah, I'd be surprised if it was to happen again, to be honest, just working together, just because of Josh works predominantly in the youth setting. That's not where I see my skill set. I see myself moving in and sitting in a senior environment. If the opportunity allowed, basically, if Josh was flexible and moved people again, then it would be fine. But no, it would again, when Josh said that his best coaching was with me, I probably would echo that. Just it allowed us opportunity to explore because we were both wanting to get better rather than it was, and we could both learn from each other and question and critique each other, I suppose, and then make the steps to develop as a duo, not just as individuals. There's two coaches that in the men's game. I think not sure what club they're at now, but they're called the Cowley brothers. They're at Huddersfield together, and it's a brother and two brothers. One's the manager, one's the assistant. That would be ideal.
Well, you're still young.
I was going to say, watch this space. It'll be the Liddiard brothers. That'll be the ones that'll be hailed.
And we've got the first interview of them.
Awesome. Well, at the end of our podcast, we like to ask our guests 3 questions. Rob, I'll start with you. So what does extraordinary performance mean to you?
I think it's doing the best you can in the circumstance that you exist.
Mm-hmm.
The extraordinary performance for Josh would be producing players for the national team. Mine would be producing players for a senior team club that I'm at the moment. So different. If you're an athlete, it'd be performing consistently at a high level. If you're working in a shop, it's hitting your markers every single time type thing. So yeah, I think it's just working at the highest possible level that you can in that space, wherever you exist.
Yeah, so it's within that kind of frame. Yeah. And what does a high-performing team look like to you? So rather than on an individual level, when everyone's working as a team.
I think it's cohesive.
Mm-hmm.
It's psychologically safe, so people can challenge and explore different ideas with each other without the sense of judgment.
Yeah.
And I think diverse, because if you have people that are in the same mindset all the time, then I think sometimes that narrows the creative thinking and opportunities develop. So having people from diverse backgrounds who have diverse personalities is really important. And that's probably something I would encourage a lot of organizations to do, is to explore their personality profiling and see what matches and what can develop their organization as a whole.
Interesting. Obviously, we do within our day-to-day, but is that something you guys have come across within football in terms of the personality profiling?
For me, I've more recently heard some
Right.
murmurs. I'm not sure what they use or how they use it. That's something I would like to see further back when I was building teams, creating staffing teams and being part of something, because actually that could have been the difference at that niche time of we didn't have an incredible budget, but having those people that can collaborate with each other and having metrics to measure that would have been helpful, because it was a guessing game. I think this person could work well with this person, or this person and this person might clash. That was very subjective. We didn't have any evidence for that at all. So I would say there's been more of it,
Mm.
recently, but probably not as I'd well, sport is quite a closed book. Some people might not be saying it, but I would probably encourage more teams to do it, to be honest.
That's interesting. Okay, sorry, that wasn't your third question, so that was just a bonus. Third question. What does good leadership look like to you?
Authenticity, collaborative, and someone who's a good person, and all the skills that's quite a cop-out answer, but someone that can relate to people, be approachable, have good self-awareness and emotional intelligence.
Same for you now.
Y-
So, first one, I'll repeat them so you
Yeah,
can.
good.
I hope you had to think about it now, though. So, what does extraordinary performance mean to you?
Similar to Rob, I think it's a bit about people that achieve things with very limited or with whatever resource they have. People put things in place that help move things forward or give better opportunities, I'd probably suggest. So, like, an example was Newport County's bottom of League Two, but we had a really good program there in terms of caring and people moving and to play professional football. And I think that was with very limited resources, 7 full-time members of staff there. When I arrived, there was 3. So there's obviously a resource change, but still very limited in terms of you go to Man United, the other end of the spectrum, there are way more than that. So people that can do things effectively with probably limited resources probably be my answer.
Right? What does a high performing team look like to you?
I think the people work together like well is obviously a massive thing, but people that are accountable for their role and then get things done is important, and people that can overlap and support where needed. Uh, so Rob was doing something that wasn't my specialty, but I'd lend a hand and I'd get things done that way. So yeah, probably saying people being accountable for their parts, but also people being collaborative with support they can give or need to receive as well.
And last one, what does good leadership look like to you?
Again, like people being authentic, people being honest, people saying things that and they're going to action them. So if I say to a parent, I've got an open door policy, you can come speak to me whenever, but then as soon as they turn up, I don't speak to them. That I've got to do what I say. So I think that's probably for me is what I try to do in terms of and get people work together as well. So in my role, it's not just about me doing something for the player; it's about the player doing something for themselves, but also the parent being part of that journey as well, or parents and guardians. The leader needs to make people be collaborative again. So yeah, I suppose just looking after all the little bits and bring them together.
Uh, I think it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you both. I'm glad we managed to not mix you up, you two. It was hard going, but no, we managed. No, it's been fascinating. Thank you so much for both of you to join today.